Hi, my name is Anton Durkai.
I'm Nora Tomey.
I'm Rita David. I'm Bernie Bashai.
And the topic my group decided to research was suicide. You will see our research question was, what new interventions should be taken for the crisis of teenage suicide in the United States? Stigma is the dishonoring of a certain subject, as you will see in the video.
Nothing wrong about speaking out. There's nothing wrong with having a cry. There's nothing wrong with having a hug. And it's not weak to speak.
So I think dialogue is the key. I think conversation is the key. I think asking your friends if they're okay and then listening is the key.
Nothing wrong about.
In a stigmatic society, people oftentimes feel like they have no one to turn to. If you look at my chart here, you will see the statistics behind suicide in the United States. These people do not feel like they have anyone to turn to in their society.
This is Maggie. She was 17 when she committed suicide. She OD'd when she was alone in her room and her parents were on a trip. The girl had a long history of mental illnesses that included PTSD. She needed thorough counseling, but her parents believed that whatever a counselor or a psychologist can do, the church can do better, which obviously didn't work. In some of her letters, she stated that she felt alone no matter how many people crowded her, and that she felt like she was going to be judged by the church and those who surround her, whether or not they were.
In our society, one may believe in a faith. They then turn to their faith leader for help if they need it. Teens across the U.S. are turning to faith leaders, but through my research, I found that faith leaders are sure that they are not given enough training in their Bible schools to counteract these things that they are expressing. Similarly, this is similar to suicide hotlines. Suicide hotlines are for teens or adults to call if they're in a crisis of committing suicide. These people are calling suicide hotlines, but these suicide hotline workers are also saying that they are not trained well enough to act on these crises.
While my peers and I were doing our research, we wanted to see where it got dated back to. It got dated back to the 20th century with this book called The Art of Suicide by Ron Brown. When reading into this book, I pulled an expert that said that suicide is an act of madness. He mentions that dating back to those generations, we don't have the tools that we have now. You have counselors, you have clinical trials, you have people to go to, and they didn't get to do that when they were in that generation. Also, while doing our research, I found a clinical art therapy that is based in Seoul, and the doctor that was overseeing this, Kim, was seeing growth in people when they were doing art. So the clinical trial was, you would go there once a week for 90 minutes, you would sit with this doctor or whoever would be overseeing it, and you would be doing art and you're hooked up to this machine, and this machine is providing you to see how well your happiness is growing, how well your self-worth is growing by just simply doing art.
Here is a PET scan done on two patients. One patient who has attempted suicide and another who has suicidal thoughts. The PET scan is mainly focused on the frontal lobe of the brain, which is a part of the brain that makes all the decisions. When asked about death for the suicide attempter, it instantly triggered a memory of them attempting suicide, and they had no control of it, shown with the little amount of blue in the circle. On the right, you can see that there is more blue done on the patient, because when asked about death, they also remembered their suicidal thoughts, but they had more control than the person on the left. Next, this is Dr. Neji Khair, and he's had 25-year experience in the psychiatric field and is a psych professor at Wayne. When asked the following questions on there, he answered with, they are under intense supervision because it is very rare and there's a 72-hour supervision on the patients. They are not allowed to have anything that can harm them in their room or any sharp objects. Next, genetics and the environment have a super impact on the brain development. So instead of going and seeking counselors first, psychologists should order a PET scan before assigning any medication to the patient. Lastly, our brains are still developing until the age of 21, so by assigning any medication to a patient at a young age can make them be dependent on the medication.
Going back to what my classmate said about how religion plays a big factor in it, the biggest problem with teens who associate themselves with certain religions is that, is it right, is it wrong, is it God's control? If you can see that the levels of the amount of people who committed suicide in their religion is very low, but when you come to the atheists, they feel like it's in their hand, it's their control, they have the right to. And that shows that sometimes being part of a certain religion does have an effect on how much willpower you have when it comes to suicide. We figured out that some solutions would have to surround school. Schools have, when you go to school, you have so many thoughts during your day. You can see that some of your classmates, all of a sudden, they draw themselves away from their groups, their grades are falling, they get into fights, and their attendance is horrible. Teachers sometimes oversee that because they don't have the right training that they need to help that student.
A limitation to that solution is how much training would go into teaching the counselors and teachers, and how long it would take for them, and if the school would have enough money to fund for them.
Another problem is the training. We mentioned that they need to do more training for the priests and pastors, because students feel like this is their safe haven. So they should be able to go to their pastor and feel like they are not being judged and they are being helped to the most. But you can't do that without breaking the stigma around the religion. And unfortunately, a bunch of churches feel like that suicide is an off-limit topic, that it shouldn't be talked about, and it shouldn't be mentioned in front of any teens or any church members. So we need to be able to break that stigma, but stigma isn't broken over minutes. It takes years, and it takes hard work for people to break that kind of talk.
To have the training come into our schools for counselors and teachers to know how to help the patients, the politicians need to be able to pass a bill in order for that to happen in all our public schools and even private schools. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for the oral defense portion. Nora, having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
Having done the presentation and our research and everything, going back to before we even started the presentation, when we started coming up with how we're doing our research, what are we going to do to get that research, was we had a list of interviews that I wish if we would have done then, this project would have been more personal and it would have been more understanding because it's firsthand for my audience.
Thank you. Tony, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your team's solution or conclusion.
Thank you for posing the question. One argument that I found very intriguing was Bernie's argument on what we are doing as a society, what is right and wrong. I never really thought of the difference between religions, that one religion may view death or even suicide differently than another. So that was very, very impacting because then I saw our solution as a very complex solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita, what is a way in which your team's solution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
It opened up a door that I didn't think a lot of teens were struggling in school or had any problems and kept to themselves. So it opened up my eyes with our solution for the training done for teachers and counselors to actually provide and help students and have them be able to open up and not feel scared to talk about their problems.
Thank you. Bernie, in what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
I think that it taught me how to be flexible when it comes to giving and taking, and especially a project like this takes time and effort from all sides. So I think that it showed me to push a little when needed and hold back a little when needed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.